program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
The opening to a new series called Star Trek, which premiered in 1966 but would only last for 3 seasons and 79 episodes.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
All the clips in this episode are courtesy of Paramount Pictures and Skydance Media, under the Fair Use provision in the U.S. Copyright Act, Title 17. 1975 excerpt from the groundbreaking late-night news show Good Night America with Geraldo Rivera, courtesy of ABC and the Walt Disney Company under Fair Use.
Science fiction series on a while back. You probably remember it. It was called Star Trek. After only 2 moderately successful seasons, that network decided to drop the program. But for the first time, really, in television history, the outraged TV audience spoke up, and they deluged NBC with approximately 1 million letters demanding that the show be kept on the air. And they were successful, at least temporarily. In the very first episode of Star Trek, the fans, as you can hear, were wildly loyal. But since it's gone off the air and into reruns, the number of Trekkies has soared, and a fantastic cult has developed around the show.
True crime.
Sex.
Political conspiracy.
Celebrity gossip.
Murder.
UFOs.
Crooked officials.
The occult. Assassination.
Courtroom drama. Rape.
Corporate scams. Scandal Sheets. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scandal Sheet. My name is Thad Housley, and today we have a holiday treat for our audience. People love when we do anniversaries, even if they themselves weren't around when the event or the artifact in question originally came to light. And today we're going to dive deep into the 60-year origin of one of the most enduring and financially successful entertainment franchises of all time, Star Trek. And I am joined by my unbelievably cultural literate co-host, Anuradha. How are you?
Am I doing that right?
Did you want? Yeah, well, you just say whatever you want.
Is that Star Trek? Did I get the right?
No, it's...
Damn it. Damn it, Jim!
What are you trying to do?
I trained my fingers. It took forever to train my fingers to do that. Okay, how about this? Is that good? Live long and prosper, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Live long and prosper. That's how I'm going to start this episode. Welcome, everybody. Live long and prosper.
So, clearly you weren't alive when the original series came out in 1966. And I myself had not even entered nursery school yet. So I didn't see it back when it first came out either. But what's that?
I said, you sure?
But anyway,
I kid.
But here's the thing. I did look up, and every year that you've been alive on this planet so far, there has been either a feature-length movie or a TV series or both playing around the world, including Kenya, with the Star Trek name. So do you have any relationship to the Star Trek franchise since it's been with you as long as you've been alive?
I feel like my parents watched it because I remember there's this guy. Is his name Spock? Spark. Jim's like, God, this is going to be a long episode.
What was this guy's name? Sparky? Yes. Hey, Sparky, get over here.
No. So, and he had like the haircut like this, and whatever,
pointy ears,
long ears, and all that kind of stuff. So, there are some things that I kind of saw, but I don't know, for some odd reason I always compared it to like Star Wars when I was younger. You know what I mean? And for this episode, I actually did the opposite. I actually made sure that I didn't really I didn't really like read up or keep myself informed because I wanted to kind of learn things on the episode and show what I don't know. So we'll see
Which is
how
considerable,
that take is.
apparently. Yeah.
So we'll see how that take is with the audience. But I do still remember some things, and then now actually in new shows, they do references. Like Black Mirror, there was an episode of Star Trek, so that's kind of, they use the same guy, the main guy. What's his name? The main guy in Star Trek.
The main guy is the captain,
William Shatner.
Yeah, William Shatner. So they used him in Black Mirror. So there was that, and then of course they do Star Trek references in Big Bang Theory all the time. Which is a good show. So that's kind of like my extent to my knowledge, but I never really sat down and watched like a whole episode.
Wow, this will be fun.
Okay.
So I can say anything.
You can.
And I'll probably believe it.
Anything.
I will probably believe it. Hey, I only watched all of the Star Wars episodes or all of the Star Wars movies maybe 5 years ago. I hadn't even watched all of Star Wars before either. So I'm a little behind.
Wow.
Just a little behind.
There's that cultural literacy thing. Yeah.
But it was good. Star Wars is really good. The new ones kind of suck. But anyways, that's another episode. But
that's another episode.
Yeah, that's another podcast episode.
So we're also joined by a personal BFF of mine going back to high school, and listeners and viewers will remember him from the Joe Biden episode we did earlier this year. Jim Maurer.
Hey, Thad. Hi, Anuradha. It's great to be here.
So, Jim, I'm not going to repeat your considerable professional resume unless you want me to add something, but many things among the many things that you are is one of the most knowledgeable people on the Star Trek franchise that I personally know. I know you said I shouldn't call you an expert, but I know you think things as granular as like Gene Roddenberry's shoe size and cholesterol level in 1966, right?
Super fan, maybe, I suppose I'm comfortable with. But there are people,
super fan.
I've never been to a Comic-Con or Star Trek convention. There are significant limits to my knowledge. Yeah, but I'm a big fan of not just the original series, but a number of the subsequent series.
Damn it.
Not so much, as we've discussed, not so much the J.J. Abrams movies, which I think came really close to completely destroying the franchise, but I suppose that's a different episode. But yeah, certainly like you, in the mid 70s when the original series was in syndication, I remember watching it pretty much every Sunday afternoon. Weekends were some reason I remember, and I still do this, Sunday afternoons, I love to just sit down and watch a rerun of the original series or TNG or something like that. It's kind of a Sunday thing because in the late 70s, that's when I remember watching the reruns in syndication.
Crap,
right,
sorry to
right.
offend
That's
you then,
when
Jim. In my lack of knowledge.
I'm not offended. I'm intrigued by your reaction, so we'll see where this goes.
And we are also joined by our amazing artificial intelligence engine, Bernice. Bernice, is Star Trek popular at the NVIDIA chip factories in Taiwan and South Korea?
They are. Our founders are all in their mid-60s in age. While they didn't see the series when originally aired, they saw it in reruns in the 70s and cite the Enterprise ship's computer as one of their inspirations to help develop their artificial intelligence chips in real life.
Okay, that's very cool, Bernice. So, Jim and Anuradha, I guess the first obvious question, and Jim's going to disagree with this because in the original rundown, I refer to it as a low-budget TV show in the 60s, which we can talk about, but it was ostensibly made for teenage boys. And so how does a little TV show from the 60s become one of the biggest entertainment franchises in history? I mean, we're talking 13 feature-length movies so far, 12 other TV series other than the original. 2 are running even as we speak. And of course, there's also video games, books, endless merchandise. I mean, Paramount Studios that owns the IP is just, it's basically printing money at this point. Anything that they slap the name Star Trek on, makes billions and billions of dollars. But Star Trek's origin, I think it begins rather humbly. So, and it was by an unlikely fighter pilot and you corrected me, Jim, World War II, not Korea, Gene Roddenberry. And then after he got, honorably discharged, he became a motorcycle cop in LA. So as our knowledgeable super fan, if that's what you call him, how does a guy like that, Gene Roddenberry, come up with $1 trillion idea like this and execute it?
Oh, yeah. So there's, I guess, a couple of ways to answer that. One is just in broad macro terms, but your lead-in sort of suggests more tactically, like how did Roddenberry pull this off in the 60s? Well, like you said, I mean, he was working for the LA Police Department. His father was a policeman too. So he was working for the LA Police Department. He ended up working in their PR department. And part of his job in the PR department, he wrote speeches for the chief of police. But part of that job was to interface with Hollywood and studios that were making shows like Dragnet, and to feed them story ideas that had some realism to it. And eventually, he would reach out to friends of his on the force that had something interesting that happened. They would write a story idea, and they would get $200 for that. And eventually he's like, well, I could do this. I could write my own story ideas. And so that was his first interaction with Hollywood, was providing story ideas to shows like Dragnet. Fast forward, eventually, he worked as a writer. He proposed a number of scripts. His first series that he actually produced in total was The Lieutenant, which was sort of a half-hour television series about sort of a Marine unit, specifically a lieutenant in the Marines, that during Cold War, during the early 60s. So he had a lot, at that point, by the mid 60s, he was pretty established as a writer and even a producer and a creator in Hollywood. And that's kind of, what gave him the platform to start to propose Star Trek. Just a couple of other things, a couple of other influences that he had. At the time, a lot of things that were on the television in the 60s were police dramas and Westerns.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that he pitched Star Trek was basically phrasing it as like a wagon train to the stars, wagon train being a 1960s Western, where this wagon train just sort of perpetually moves west and never really gets to where they're going, but interesting things happen to them along the. So it was awesome. A wagon train to the stars. And another interesting influence, the only other one I'll throw out there for now is, he based Captain Kirk on Horatio Hornblower, right? Which is C.S. Foster novel from the late 30s that then became a 1951 film with Gregory Peck. So this Napoleonic British sea captain kind of had all of the attributes, a lot of the attributes that they wrote eventually into the James Kirk character. So these are sort of the influences and the industry and the milieu that he came out that allowed him to sort of propose this to the studios and to Desilu.
So, well, that's wild. That whole thing is wild. But so Jim, Thad originally this wasn't the first thing Thad had recruited me for, this podcast. Originally, I was actually supposed to be a Johns Hopkins medical student in a post-apocalyptic animated film that Thad was creating, and he thought he could get on Netflix. And, a million years later, here we are still not seeing that movie yet. Still freaking waiting for that. But getting into this, how did Gene Roddenberry go from writing scripts for TV shows to pitching his own show where he would now be the showrunner or producer. Like, that's very interesting, like the transition.
Yeah, like I said, I think, and I don't know if I could get into like any more detail, but he had been a showrunner for a show before Star Trek, right? Which was the Lieutenant, and he was writing story ideas, and then he was writing scripts, and he just sort of worked his way up until eventually he was producing the Lieutenant. So Star Trek wasn't the first show that he had produced. And interesting thing about the Lieutenant is, let me see, I've got these notes here.
Yeah, didn't he get in trouble for that somehow with the Army or?
Yeah, so the one of the last episodes that they shot, it actually involved Dennis Hopper and somebody else, but it was a racial episode. So there was a black guy and a white guy in this Marine platoon, and the black guy starts off being really prejudicial against the black guy, but eventually by the end of the show, the black guy becomes really prejudicial against the white guy. So it was this really sort of complicated thing about race. And a big part of the Lieutenant was that the studio had an agreement with the Marine Corps that allowed them to film at Camp Pendleton, is the one in San Diego, I think. And so they were using a lot of resources from the Marine Corps, the bays and the trucks and some uniforms and extras. The Marine Corps was really supporting this. But when Gene wanted to do that show that dealt, pretty explicitly with racism, the Marine Corps said, we're not gonna let you do that anymore. So they kind of kicked him out. And when the Marine Corps kicked him out of Camp Pendleton, that was sort of the end of the show. And actually that episode never aired. And then the other interesting thing you were asking me about the Lieutenant, let me see, I've got this. Other people, they weren't regulars on the show, but people who had guest appearances on that, I think it ran for a couple of years. Leonard Nimoy, Majel Barrett, Nichelle Nichols, Walter Koenig, even Ricardo Montalban. These were all actors that worked on the Lieutenant, and a lot of the production people that worked on the Lieutenant came along with Gene Roddenberry. So I think the answer, like I said, if we're talking tactically, how did Roddenberry get into this position? As I'm not as big of a fan of Hollywood maybe as Thad is, but as you read this story, it's like, yeah, well, networks matter, right? So, he was in the right place at the right time. He was part of Hollywood. He was not an outsider. He was established in that industry. He had contacts with cinematographers and directors and actors. And, he was pretty well positioned to pull this off. Now, he had kind of a reputation of being a little difficult, but
just a little.
For the most part, he was pretty well established in Hollywood by this point.
That's crazy.
Jim, in the rundown, there's that green section there where you talk about, or at least I'm suggesting that you talk about why science fiction became an important thing to television. Well, to movies first, and then to television. You want to say anything about that, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the time, so that's like Roddenberry's career. The other aspect then is like what was going on at the time, right?
Right.
And so in the mid '60s, there was certainly a lot of interest, a lot of piqued interest in space and space explorations.
Right.
Because
you had the Apollo program and everything.
Launched Sputnik in 1957. In 1961, Kennedy said that we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. We choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they're hard, right? That was
because they are hard. You got to say it like you're from Boston. Hard.
Yeah. So there was, and then, it was pretty close to still, it was kind of post-World War II, Cold War era, nuclear power, was a thing. There was just a lot of interest, and I'd even go so far as to say kind of faith in technology in the early 60s and in the mid 60s. We weren't quite yet into this point where we were, anti-nuclear or anti-technology. So there was this sense, this faith coming out of middle America, I think from the 50s and the 60s, that technology whether it's not nuclear technology or computer technology or automotive technology, it was all like expanding in these amazing ways. And so there was a lot of interest in science fiction. It was reflected on television and in movies, shows like Lost in Space. And so, yeah, I think that's part of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
And like I said, there was a lot of interest in a lot of existing shows, television shows were Westerns. And when you start to look at, like, well, you had mentioned Star Wars is maybe even more explicit, but there's a lot of kind of Western sort of themes that crop up in the plot devices of Star Trek. So Roddenberry and a lot of the people that he worked with, a lot of the actors that he worked with, had done a lot of Westerns. And so this sort of combination of Western and sci-fi with character development. And then we haven't even started to talk about sort of the social issues that ran underneath the episode, right? So in the mid 60s, Roddenberry was kind of a beatnik from the 50s, but it merged pretty well in that sort of mid to late 60s sort of culture, the cultural issues that were swirling around in the mid to late 60s that were starting around the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Act. So it was ripe for sort of a sci-fi thing that was kind of action oriented, that had some sort of interesting things, but also importantly had these sort of not so deeply hidden, but sort of beneath the surface messages, frankly, social messages, cultural statements, cultural reflections, which is what science fiction does best, right? So science fiction isn't really about making a comment about what's happening in the future. It's really using that as a lens to make statements about what's happening now. And I think more than any of the other sci-fi movies or television shows at the time, Star Trek did that, right? It was able to use science fiction as a way of making statements about contemporary culture.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, his job from the beginning sounded, fascinating to begin with, just being an advisor like that. I would love that, but, it really is, and it's crazy because nothing's changed, right? It really is about who you know, being in the right place at the right time, little bit of luck, that kind of thing. So, no, I think that's really fascinating, and according to the info that you just told us, it was commonplace in the 1960s for a TV network to order a complete pilot episode of a series they were considering to commit to. So I imagine they wanted to see what they were buying, but it seems like Star Trek wasn't exactly like a favorite, like, I Dream of Jeannie or Hogan's Heroes or those kinds of things, which were very cheap to produce on a couple of sets. So Star Trek had fancy sets with blinking lights and lots of space special effects that were probably, pretty expensive, I would imagine.
Yeah. There's a few things to unpack there. Certainly, it was not cheap to produce. We could talk about the pilots. We could talk about how much the pilots cost to produce. We could talk about the set design, the design of the ship. We could talk about the technology that special effects that they had to invent. I think what's kind of interesting though about that too is that, and again, I'm not an expert on the studio system, but Desilu was the studio that produced the show, and then Desilu had to then market that show and get a network to pick it up and to order series. So Desilu, which is a studio that Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz created, she was the first female studio mogul.
I loved her. Yeah.
They created this production studio, and by the time Roddenberry was pitching Star Trek, Desi Arnaz had left. They had split up. And he was no longer part of that. So Lucille Ball was on her own. So she was literally the first female studio mogul. And these, as an upstart studio, their financials were not particularly stable. You'd have to incur all of these expenses for Star Trek, for example, $600,000 for the first pilot, The Cage. You'd have to incur all these expenses. It was completely risk that you bore with the hope that a network would look at that pilot and then pick it up.
Yeah, it's an expensive way to audition, isn't it? To actually make a complete total show. and then they can still say no, right?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm not an expert on the way the studio system works, but I think the studio will give, okay, we'll give you $50,000 for 3 scripts. So you go off and write 3 scripts, and then we'll pick the best one. So they give you like little infusions of cash along the way. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the only way that the studio that is producing the show is actually they even lose money on the episodes as they're airing, because the studio is paying them barely enough money to produce that one episode. And then subsequently, like where the studios make money is in the syndication and in the reruns. Mm. And that was something that actually Desi Arnaz invented in the early 60s, this whole idea of syndication and reruns and taking properties. That was actually an innovation that Desi Arnaz came up with as part of Desilu. Yeah,
and a couple things to add. So the reason Paramount owns the franchise now is because they bought Desilu at some point or merged with it or something like that. So there's that. But and like what you said, where because TV really didn't get off the ground anyways until the 50s, and not a lot of people had it. So and like you're saying, there wasn't really the whole idea of syndication. Like when my show is canceled, I can still, basically keep it alive like a zombie till the end of time. I mean, when I was a kid, when I was watching Star Trek, they were playing reruns of I Love Lucy every single day.
I didn't even know they were from the same. That's crazy. Oh my gosh.
Well, and the thing is, I Love Lucy was the first.
I actually used to watch I Love Lucy.
True It was the first true sitcom that had, that's okay. A live audience. So the way, we don't even have sitcoms anymore, do we? But I still remember things like Cheers and Friends and stuff like that, where they have live audiences and they go out and the actors and they have standing sets and they only work for 30 minutes. They roll the cameras and they do it over if they have to, but the audience laughs and claps and stuff like that. Desi and Lucy invented that.
They also invented, and I'm not going to get this right, and Thad, you can help me when and fill in the gaps. But before Desi Arnaz figured this stuff out, like you would tape all of the tapings and all of the production was done in New York, and then broadcast mostly in an Eastern time zone. And there was this kludgy process where, as the show was being broadcast, they would videotape the show off of the monitors. And then that's what would get rebroadcast in the Western time zone. So it was really pretty crappy quality. But Desi Arnaz figured out this way to videotape it, use videotape instead of film or something. And I'm sure I'm getting parts of this wrong, but to basically videotape the show on the East Coast and then fly it really fast to the West Coast or deliver it. And so I guess the reason that all of this is important about syndication and this process of recording shows is that, Desilu was pretty innovative. Lucille Ball was pretty innovative, and they were willing to sort of take risks. Eventually they had some other pretty interesting properties. They did about the time that they were producing and pitching Star Trek. They were also producing I Spy and Mission Impossible. I Spy was one of the first, if not the first show that featured an African American as the main cat. Bill Cosby was the co-star of I Spy.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
The point is that Desilu and especially Lucille Ball in at the beginning, Desi Arnaz, but by the mid 60s it was all Lucille Ball. They were willing to kind of take risks. They were willing to take creative risks. They were willing to experiment with technologies and come up with a pilot that a lot of people would have said this isn't I Dream of Jeannie. This isn't Gilligan's Island. This isn't even Wagon Train or Gunsmoke. So what are you doing?
Then, okay. So we really didn't talk about the pilots. Did you want to go into, because they didn't just do one, they did two, which was very unusual, wasn't it?
Yeah, usually, as far as I know, it might be the only time that this happened. But
right,
as we're talking about the way the studio system worked is, you get some interest from a network who might we might do this. So here's some money to develop the script. okay, we like that script, so here's a little bit of money to develop the pilot. The studio takes that money, but mostly and develops the pilot, shows it and then starts to market that to the networks to find a network that's going to air it. Hopefully they air it. Hopefully they air it on a decent time slot. So the first episode that got, or the first pilot, as Thad said, there were 2 pilots produced. The first pilot produced was called The Cage, and it starred Jeffrey Hunter, was that his name?
Yeah, I think it is.
So it starred Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike, right? It wasn't Captain Kirk yet. And Majel Barrett, who was Gene Roddenberry's side piece at the time, starred Majel Barrett as number 1, which if you're a TNG fan, but when they resurrected this phase, but for the rest of the original series, they didn't use this phrase number 1, but basically the first officer says there's a woman first officer, and Jeffrey Hunter, the only actor in The Cage in that first pilot that made it into the ongoing series was Leonard Nimoy, who was Spock. So they produced this.
That's Sparky to you, Anuradha. The character.
Hey, I know the name Leonard Nimoy because he literally, they talk about him a lot on Big Bang Theory also. Just saying.
They do.
Oh, okay.
They do.
Okay.
So, without, I don't know if I could do a plot summary very quickly, but basically they find this planet. They think that there's a stranded humans, a handful of humans that are stranded on this planet. They go down there to investigate it. It turns out that none of these humans are real. There's a race of beings that live beneath the earth that can control your mind. They can control your perception. So they can make you think that there's a person in front of you who's not really there. They can make you think that there's a monster in front of you. So there's this race of beings that they use mind control to influence people, and they're trying to
sort of like the Trump administration,
bring aliens to the planet and kind of trap them so that they can repopulate their planet because their planet has been devastated. And Captain Pike kind of has this relationship with the only other human female that's trapped, and the plot develops, and that's The Cage, and there's sort of monsters and fights and what have you, but it's basically about the tension between these and I forgot the name of the race of people, but these beings that can control
Telosians.
Telosians, thank you. The Telosians can control, and it's the first 3 or 4 times I watched The Cage, it seemed to me, I was mostly interested in what was going on with Captain Pike and Verena. And Verena as a green Orion slave girl and all this stuff. But really, I noticed it when I was rewatching it for this episode. It's really about, it's also one of there's a theme in Star Trek throughout about sort of a distrust of technology, which is kind of interesting. And so the Telosians are in this state where they can't, they relied more and more on their mental abilities and technology, that they don't really experience anything anymore. It was almost a statement about television in the mid 60s, but it could be a statement about social media in 2025. They've turned over all of their physical experiences to their mental capabilities and to their technology. So the only way they experience anything is through these beings that they've captured. And it's so that's The Cage. That's The Cage. And when they first showed that pilot to the networks, they didn't really particularly like that pilot for a couple of reasons, but they loved the idea. The network executives recognized that this was a really solid series. It had legs. It's just that they wanted another pilot. They wanted to make changes. They wanted it to work out. So they ordered a second pilot to see what could be done. And the top line summaries were that, well, there wasn't enough action in the first pilot. That was one issue. I don't quite get that, but again, in the mid 60s, Westerns and cop shows, they wanted more action. And they also, they didn't like the character Spock. They thought he looked sort of demonic. They thought that, with pointy ears and pale skin, that he was sort of satanic. They didn't like Spock. And they didn't like a female first officer. They didn't like a female second in command. So they were pushing Gene Roddenberry back. And like I said, he was sleeping with Majel Barrett at the time. So she was kind of his girlfriend. And they're saying, we don't want her. We don't want a female second officer. So he figured he could only save one. He could either save Spock, the Vulcan, or he could save the woman. And so he opted at that point to fight the battle for Spock. And so was able to save the character of Spock, but he wasn't able to save the character of number one.
But she came back as a nurse, Nurse Chapel. Later,
she came back not only as Nurse Chapel episodically throughout the original series, but she was also the computer voice on pretty much all of the series. So when you watch a Star Trek episode, like Bernice here, that we work with Bernice throughout the original series and TNG at least. I don't know if she's in any other episode, any other series or movies, but she's the voice of the Enterprise computer as well. So and that's what he did. He told Major, look, I got you. Believe me, I'll get you back on the show one way or another. But this character of, it's just too much right now. And he really wanted to save Spock because part of the idea, it didn't manifest so much in the first couple of pilots, but once they got into the regular series, part of the idea was the diversity of the cast, right? So there was obviously a white man who was the captain and this white Southern dude who was the doctor. But there was Nichelle Nichols, who was an African-American woman who served as a communications officer, a bridge officer, really super important, really technical. So this is 1966, and they're showing a black woman having all this technical capability. They've got George Takei, who's Asian, basically Japanese, and William Koenig, who is playing a Russian. So this is, like I said, 15 years after World War II. They've got a Japanese guy on the bridge. They've got a Russian guy on the bridge. They've got an African-American. And they've got a whole different race, a Vulcan, this guy from a completely different planet. So this diversity was really important to Roddenberry, especially on the bridge. And that's why he fought so hard to keep Leonard Nimoy as Spock.
Damn, I can't even imagine how that conversation went. Like, can you still continue to be my side piece? But I will have to take you out of this. I'm keeping the demon-looking character.
He did right.
And he's simultaneously in a romantic relationship with Nichelle Nichols. So
he was, Roddenberry.
So he chose the white girl over the black girl. I would have gone with Nichelle Nichols myself, but that's,
So he was married. he was married. He was having an affair with Majel Barrett, and then he was having an affair at the same time with Nichelle Nichols.
Holy crap.
This was a consistent theme throughout. And this was one of the problems that the studios had with him. They're like, they knew this. They knew this stuff was going on. And they're like, I don't know about this guy.
He was also a drug addict, so there's all kinds of things going around there. He really liked his coke, but
oh man!
So so then they did a second pilot, like you were saying, Jim. They were
where no man has gone before. So in the second pilot, I think they got William Shatner because Jeffrey Hunter was mostly his wife was very against him doing this sci-fi stuff because these sci-fi roles were a risk because they could end up being kind of silly or comical. There's nothing worse than trying to be dramatic but being perceived as sort of comical. So
plus, wasn't he considered more like a movie actor, and being on TV was much less he was in his biggest role that we remember him in. He's in John Ford's The Searchers, with John Wayne. Which is a classic, a cinema classic. And here now he's going to do a TV show, targeted towards
science fiction TV
TV show targeted towards teenage boys. So I can see why his wife is like, no, You're going to do movies, dude. You're not going to do SAG rate, $350 a week bullshit TV. So I get it.
So, and they only contracted, if you did a pilot, you only had a contract to do that pilot, and you weren't necessary. And you would, so if you started a pilot, you had to sign a contract that said if it got picked up, then you were sort of obligated to do the series.
Right. That's what I thought. I mean, because otherwise you'd be so at a disadvantage.
But they didn't pick it up, right?
No.
You did the pilot,
right?
And they didn't pick up the series. So Jeffrey Hunter's wife was like, he's out.
He's
out
of here
to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's when, they brought in William Shatner, and they did Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is basically about a couple of people on the bridge that are Enterprise crew members getting exposed to this thing that makes them superhuman. It gives them sort of superhuman powers, and then these two crew members, as they get more and more superhuman powers, they become more and more a danger to the rest of the crew, and the crew has to deal with that. Fast forward to the end, there's a fight scene, and so you get your action between Captain Kirk and this one guy. But again, what's interesting about Where No Man Has Gone Before is that they put the fight scene in there. Gene Roddenberry was able to keep Leonard Nimoy, and he was able to bring in William Shatner, who is a pretty big name himself, pretty well-established actor in movies and Broadway. But he also kept like these underlying themes going. So for my money, it's basically a statement about how we have to be really careful with this idea of superhuman powers, about individuals that get a lot of power, a lot of supernatural power, and become kind of either superhuman or almost like gods. Like, these are the kind of characters they crop up throughout the original series, throughout TNG, throughout the rest of the entire franchise. And it's a statement, basically, in my mind, about the danger of religion, basically the danger of putting all your faith in a god or superhuman people. And so that's what Where No Man Has Gone Before was based on. So yeah, that was the second pilot. And based on that second pilot with that second cast, completely different cast, except for Leonard Nimoy, then was it NBC, I think, picked up and ordered 26 episodes.
Right. It was NBC.
So Jim, like, Gene Roddenberry was originally hired to make a show that competed with Lost in Space, which was kind of like cartoonish, like silly sci-fi genre thing that, no one really remembers now. But Roddenberry instead took a gamble, made intelligent science fiction, and hired the best writers he could find, which is good. But because he's a pervert, he did put all the girls in mini skirts, and he also got great ratings in the first season. Gee, I wonder why, right?
Well, it is the mid '60s, right? And so,
but there's a bit of a contradiction there. I mean, you've got this cerebral science fiction stuff, and let's totally objectify our female cast as much as possible.
Yeah, okay. So here's an interesting story. I mean, all of that's true. You're right. It was objectification. It doesn't hold up to our standards in the 21st century,
which I was all for. When I was in junior high school watching this, I was like totally. Oh,
I bet you were.
That is so great. I love this.
Nasty.
Me and my dad are like, yes.
There's the mini skirts on the crew members, but from my mind, I think one of the sexiest costumes I've ever seen in TV or film were the costumes that were in What Little Girls Are Made Of.
Oh yeah.
I forgot who the actress is. I probably have it here, but yeah. So the point is,
gravity-defying type stuff. It was just
I need to look this up.
Sorry, Anuradha.
I need to look this up.
Right?
We'll send you a picture. I mean, the costume designer, like you said, Jim, whoever he or she was, when it came to the female leads, that were only going to be in that one episode, they always came up with something special.
Jerry Jackson was the actress on What Little Girls Are Made Of, and she just wore this, and it was completely it didn't reveal no nip, no nothing, but it was really anyway.
Still.
So here's the thing I wanted to mention. So I was reading an interview with Nichelle Nichols. And she was completely aware of this stuff, right? She knew exactly what was going on. And so when she's a communications officer, so she has a station at the bridge and she sit there. It's a little bit behind the captain. And so a lot of times when they have a shot, when they shoot her sitting at her station talking to the captain, it's kind of at the side. And so she was aware that her legs were completely showing, and she would actually pull her skirt up while she was sitting in the chair, so she would show more of her leg.
Well, and they were really mini skirts. I mean, it was, and they were underneath their mini skirts. I mean, they were literally, we're talking way above the knee, sort of like cheerleaders, so you were seeing something that, looked like, a bikini bottom or something like that. But, yeah. And it's just like every time Uhura, would bend over, it'd be like, oh my God. She dropped her pencil.
And my point is she was aware of that. My point is Nichelle Nichols was aware of that. She knew that her legs were one of her best assets. And so she was all about showing as much leg as she could, because she knew that was one of her best assets. And
she was before she was on Star Trek, she was a professional dancer on Broadway, and she was in magnificent shape. I mean, you see pictures of her. She looks like an Olympic athlete. She is just amazing.
May I just interject? Nichelle Nichols, the actress who played Uhura in the original 3-season series, was originally a dancer and singer on Broadway. After the series shut down, she returned to Broadway and also appeared in numerous films. She reprised her role as Uhura in 6 successful Hollywood Star Trek films, which made her independently wealthy. Her autobiography Beyond Uhura, Star Trek and Other Memories became a bestseller. She was always a favorite at Star Trek conventions. She volunteered for NASA for many years, helping to recruit African American women to the space program. She passed away of natural causes at age 89 in 2022.
So that allows us to say, yeah, her first love was Broadway. She was a dancer. So after the first season, she became famous, right? The first season it got great ratings, and it became, all of the people were on the cover of TV Guide, which was a magazine back then that I'm sure you probably have never seen, but they were all on the cover. And so Nichelle Nichols was getting all these offers for movies and Broadway, which is what she really wanted to do. She really wanted to go back to Broadway. And she had told Roddenberry she wasn't going to come back for the second season. And then a couple of days after she did that, and Roddenberry said, well, why don't you just think about it? Because you're really important to the show. This is what we really want to do. She had a conversation with Martin Luther King Jr. They kind of, I don't know, ran into each other at some sort of a NAACP event or BAFTA event or something. And she told, and Martin Luther King said that he was a big fan of hers. And she's like, well, I appreciate that, but I'm leaving the show. I'm going to, and he's like, you can't do that because you are, your role is really important for African Americans, especially African American women.
I bet it is. I kid.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, we're talking about the eye candy, but there's tons of scenes where she's doing, really technical stuff, and she's, there's a famous scene, I forgot which episode it is, that the communication system gets blown away or shorted out or something, and she's got to fix it. And Spock is saying, well, there's nobody here that could fix it other than you, so we're really relying on you to do it. So yeah, I mean, the eye candy doesn't, you shouldn't think that in some way negated or completely counteracted the positive impact of having a Black woman as an officer on the bridge of a spaceship doing really technical tasks, and periodically, the whole ship depends on her ability to communicate and to get those communication systems working.
So, the other thing, since we're talking about Nichelle Nichols, who plays the character of Uhura, so she, your story about Martin Luther King, she ends up breaking up with Gene Roddenberry. It, kind of comes down to him, like, well, he had to choose between Majel Barrett and Nichelle, and he went with Majel Barrett. But she stays with the show for all 3 seasons. And then this is sort of a historic thing about Star Trek. There's another episode where you've got a race of people that can do mind control and stuff like that. And they amuse themselves by making people do absurd, ridiculous things that they don't want to do. And they make Captain Kirk, played by William Shatner, and Nichelle Nichols kiss one another, have a passionate kiss, which, he doesn't really, he flirts with, he never, even though he's sort of like supposed to be like a romantic lead guy, like he meets, over the course of the series, he meets a lot of like old girlfriends, that he knew in college or something like that, or at the academy, but he doesn't actually have any kind of a relationship with anybody, and certainly not with a member of his crew, so there'd be no way that he would be kissing a girl, even though, there might be little flirtatious moments here and there. So, they're like, no, we can't do this. We're coworkers. We can't kiss. And plus, she's black and he's white. And there's never been an interracial kiss on United States television ever up to that point. So that was pretty controversial. Wasn't it, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so frightened, Captain. I'm so very frightened.
That's the way they want you to feel. Makes them think that they're alive.
I know it. But I wish I could stop trembling.
Try not to think of them. Try.
I'm thinking of all the times on the Enterprise when I was scared to death. And I would see you so busy at your command. And I would hear your voice from all parts of the ship. And my fears would fade. And now they're making me tremble. But I'm not afraid. I am not afraid.
This stuff is the power of science fiction, and I think Roddenberry understood that. And Samuel Peoples was a writer that Roddenberry used as a consultant and who wrote for the series. And so I think they understood this about science fiction, that you could use this environment and this universe that you created to do things and to say things that you wouldn't be able to do on like a Western or a contemporary police drama. So I think they were using science fiction to its fullest extent to be able to make statements about a whole range of things, race, war, conflict. Yeah.
No, but you know what, actually, really quick side note.
Yeah.
Y'all are nasty because I just saw what the outfits were for What Are Little Girls Made Of? And literally she just has one cloth going this way and one cloth going this way. So you guys are real gross. But anyway, sorry.
Gross? It's not gross.
No.
You can't see any nipples.
It's just that, Jim, not you. Just kidding. What you say?
Yeah, that can be gross. Yeah.
I was an
it's
altar boy.
It's completely normal. You guys were like 12, 10 years old, completely normal. Just making fun.
Well, I gotta say, compare that to like what Miley Cyrus does in Wrecking Ball. Okay,
oh God, I know.
Come on,
I know it's a bit
twerking.
I guess it's crazy because I think,
or the supreme being of all 20-something girls,
Beyonce?
No, the white
Rihanna?
chick.
Who?
No, the white chick who married the football player.
Kim Kardashian?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Swift's costume.
Yeah.
They're not married yet. They just got engaged, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So look at Taylor Swift's costuming. Look at Miley Cyrus. I mean, geez, this stuff. This stuff from what little girls are made of is nothing.
No. I think you know what? I think it all comes down to I was just a little bit shocked for that time that they actually allowed. You know what I mean? Like when I looked it up.
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, like I was actually really shocked. Like for that time, it's very scandalous, and I think that's why I was.
Yeah, you're wondering how they got it
absolutely.
through the censor, right? You know how they got approval to do it because
No,
even if
exactly.
you wore that right now and went into the grocery store or something, people would be like, "What the hell are you wearing?" You know, you can't walk into a grocery store like with a bikini or something. I mean, but this wasn't the beach. This is supposed to be, you know.
And that's what I'm saying. Like literally, it's
I don't
one material this way, one material, and I think that's why I was like, oh damn, you know what I mean? So that's why I was making fun of you guys. But anyways, yeah.
No, it's great, and it's a great point. Like it's amazing that they were able to do this stuff in the mid '60s.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And I think that's where you know there's I'm a little conflicted because I feel like he was so forward thinking with so many things with the show, right? Like, you know, making sure that there's diversity, make sure, you know, he's showing it in different ways, you know, really pushing for you know, an African American woman to have a role where it's like a prominent role. But then he does stupid stuff like putting him in minis. You know, it's just like there's just like this push and pull, and I just want to like slap him. But anyway, sorry. So that inadvertently does make a point. So Star Trek had the first multiracial cast in primetime television, right? So of course Spock was, I guess, an alien. I'm reading. You know, but many other regulars were non-European. So Uhura was Nigerian, the helmsman Sulu was Japanese, Scotty was Scottish, which Scotty the Scottish, that's funny. O'Reilly was Irish, of course. Chekhov was a Russian guy. And then this was in the middle of the Cold War. So almost all of the admirals of the Federation were black guys. So Roddenberry had to fight the network on these casting choices. I'm imagining for that time he probably did, right?
Yeah, like I said, he could. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And this is where there's that conflict, right? Of like he's making all these great choices, pushing for diversity, and then he's just like, yeah, but I still want to be like, you know, a perv and do all this stuff. So I think that's what like kind of doesn't make sense, but
yeah, I mean,
ratings are ratings.
You got to make it interesting, right? Like even the feedback from the networks after the first pilot was, well, there needs to be more action, right? There needs to be more of a fight scene, more guns, more shooting. There, you know, so you know there needs to be little you know, hooks. These are hooks, right?
Of course,
that you pull people in. And yeah, the costuming, especially of the women, was one hook in the first, you know, in the first pilot in the cage. There's a scene where Susan Oliver is doing this crazily provocative dance as a green Orion slave girl. So it's literally like this idea that you're, you know, it's this environment where there's like international prostitution, and it must be okay because she's not a human being. So you can have these crazy fantasies about what you would do with a green slave girl, right? So
appeals to someone.
Yeah, look that
out
one
there.
up on Anuradha. Well, you know, you got to remember his target audience, right? So they're competing against Lost in Space. It's teenage boys, you know, and college kids and stuff like that was the target. Now it may have had a broader audience. I think it's adult, you know, themes that we were talking about probably attracted, you know, the dads of those boys, but that was the target, right? That was who they were going after.
Yeah.
So I'd also like to make the point too that just as a visual artist, right, and you have to kind of rewind yourself back to the mid '60s. I mean, Star Trek, you know, he was trying to make it visually really interesting, and and compared to the other shows, any of the other shows that were on TV, certainly Lost in Space, right? Visually, Star Trek was so much better. I mean, yeah, the costuming and the miniskirts, but the ship itself was incredibly different from any ship that was portrayed on any science fiction show or movie before that. The special effects were interesting. That even the uniforms, right? There's the famous, you'd probably heard cultural references to red shirts that end up being killed. So you red shirt somebody. So the fact that the shirts were red or orange or yellow or blue or whatever, that was designed specifically to cater to the relatively new technology of color TV. So the show, I think the other thing, and this isn't Roddenberry so much as the cinematographers and the art directors, right? The show, especially for its time, but even sort of today, it's just visually really interesting, right?
Sure.
All of these elements are just visually kind of revolutionary compared to whatever else was on television at the time. And yeah, the mini skirts and the costuming was part of that, but I think it was all sort of these visual hooks to keep you interested and keep the show, kind of artsy in a way.
Right.
Right.
No, that makes sense.
One of the things that, so you had talked before about how he always finds a way to insert these various social themes into the scripts, into the episodes. And one of the things that came out of one of the books that you asked me to read was that, one of the reasons the NBC executives didn't like Roddenberry, other than the fact that he was just sort of a prick to work with, was the fact that he kept inserting his political views. And they were actually fairly conservative. And in fact, Gene Roddenberry described himself, as a war veteran, as a lifelong registered Republican. But when you look at some of these things, it sounds like he's really pushing sort of a liberal agenda, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
At least for the 60s.
The greatest thing that Gene Roddenberry did as the show creator was he created this universe, the Star Trek universe, that has lots of moving parts and lots of elements in it, and they're all very believable. And within that universe, he explores really interesting themes. So, like we talked about a little bit before, for a science fiction show, there, as you go through even just the first season, there's a lot of episodes where the theme is like, we got to be careful with technology because this can completely destroy our planet, right? So there's this sense of a sort of distrust of technology. There's also this very critical, and it starts in the original series, but it bleeds over into the Next Generation and all the subsequent series, just not the J.J. Abrams bubblegum shit. But, this idea that, supernatural power, supernatural beings, godlike beings, these are things that should not be trusted. These are things that cause more problems than they solve. These are things that human beings need to overcome, godlike creators. This idea, he has a couple of episodes, even in the first season, that are very anti-war. There's an episode where I forgot if this is in the first season or not, but there's a war between two opposing races on the same planet or on two nearby planets, and they're fighting each other and they hate each other, and it's very racial because they both have white on one side of their face and black on the other side of their face, but on the races, the white and the black is switched, so they look exactly the same. It's just on one race they're black on the right side and white on the left side, and on the other race they're black on the left side and white on the right side. So he's got all these statements about war and racism, distrust of supernatural beings. And over all of that, though, and this is the thing that really sets Star Trek apart, I think, more than anything else, over all of that is it's this incredibly positive vision of the future, right? So if you compare it to a lot of the science fiction stories that were produced in the late 70s or the early 80s, things like Aliens, for example, or even Blade Runner, these dystopian visions of the future. Star Trek had an incredibly positive vision of the future, this very neoliberal humanitarian sense that the trajectory of humankind is generally positive, that we're going to get better and better and better. So we're going to get to a place where, for example, we don't worry about money. We're going to get to a place where we only care about bettering ourselves. We're going to get to a place where what we care about is exploration of the physical space as well as our intellectual space. Exploration is the highest value, right? We're not going to care about distinctions between men and women or races or even different races of alien beings, right? We're all going to be able to work together. So this is an incredibly positive vision of the future that is absent in almost every other science fiction, like I said, Aliens or Blade Runner are the ones that come to mind. Even Star Wars, right? Even Star Wars, because Star Wars, if you listen to the trailers at the beginning, like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So these are not human beings. These are not people that are coming from Earth. And so everything that happens there is just this completely separate thing. But Star Trek, it's from Earth, it's from the Federation, it's, and from that it expands out into this really positive vision of the future.
Mm-hmm. So we've sort of gone off the rundown, and Jim has talked about everything anyways. Anuradha, is there anything you would want to ask Jim that maybe we haven't covered yet? Because I want to make sure he gets his deadline too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I just learned so much, and it's so crazy because whenever I would see little snippets and that kind of thing, I always thought that, it's just a show about like they're going to different planets and this, like I didn't know, right? And there's just so much behind this. There's a whole history behind this, and a whole history behind each character. Now I'm learning, you know what I mean? I did not know that Lucille Ball was kind of behind everything, which is amazing because I absolutely love her. I grew up watching, which it was way before my time, but I actually grew up watching I Love Lucy. That was one of the only shows that I was allowed to watch when I was little, and we had like I think like 7 channels when I came to this country, and one of them played I Love Lucy all the time. So, I just feel like it's just been very interesting kind of learning about, her as like no one really talks about it, her as the power woman behind all these amazing franchises, and I didn't know that. So
absolutely,
I feel like I learned a lot.
I can't come up with the exact date or whatever, but there are stories in the fans, the histories where after the first pilot or something, and they're seeing how much this is a really expensive show to produce. And Thad and I sort of disagree over this, but it was pretty much the most expensive show. The only show that was more expensive to produce than this show in the 1960s was I Spy. And that was because in I Spy, these, Bill Cosby and this other guy, they would shoot on location in Morocco, in Tokyo, in Mexico. So I Spy was like $250,000 an episode. Star Trek was like, it was budgeted for about $190,000 an episode. And even before they got into the series, when they were just making the pilots, there were these points where a lot of the studio executives would be in a room with Lucille Ball, and they're like, yeah, this isn't going to be profitable for us. It might be a great show, but it's just too expensive to produce. We can't these special effects and the costuming, and William Shatner by himself is getting like $10,000 an episode. Like, this is an expensive thing to produce. And Lucille Ball was the sole voice in the room that made the decision that said, no, we're going to go forward with this.
That's amazing.
Well, there are some things in there that I would dispute some of your numbers. In fact, William Shatner, who wrote 2 books specifically about Star Trek. Both were bestsellers. One was called Star Trek Memories, and the other was called Star Trek Movie Memories. Now, he doesn't remember getting $10,000 an episode. He got SAG plus 500 a week. So according to him, now he could be lying. And he also would dispute you on some of your other financial numbers. But another great point here is that compared to Bonanza, or something, or the Andy Griffith Show, it was going to be more expensive to produce, right? So and the thing is, we didn't really get into, the first season was pretty successful, but then they kept kind of moving it around, and they gave it bad time slots for their target audience. And then by the third season, they're like running it at like 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night. What 14-year-old boy is going to be watching TV, on Friday? So, I mean, it just totally went in the toilet, and it got canceled, after 3 seasons. But the reason people like Jim and I could see it in junior high school, it came into syndication, and you were talking about syndication earlier, and it was fantastic. It was like the most popular syndicated show out there because, which was sort of unexpected. I mean, they were definitely going to put it into syndication, but it just became so popular. And then over the course of the 70s, up until whenever the first movie was, when was that? 79?
78, 79.
Yeah. So it took them a long time, but I mean, Paramount was just banking, on just running these episodes over and over and over again. And, and I was able to watch every single episode like 10 times, in 5 years or something, because it was just playing everywhere. And, that's sort of one of the keys to the franchise. So it starts out, we were talking about a lot of significant things about it, but, from the standpoint of it making impact when it was actually on the air, pretty modest, right? But in syndication, really launched it into this $100 billion franchise, whatever it is now, after all of these movies and 12 different TV series and stuff. I mean, what do you think about that, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's a testament. Like I said, there's a lot of people that worked on the show in the original series that deserve a lot of credit. The costume designers, the makeup artists, like we haven't talked about Spock's ears, the challenges they had of getting that, the makeup artists, the cinematography, the art direction, the set design, all of that is. But what Roddenberry had, like I said, is he built this universe, right? And it works together. You understand what a transporter is, even though you don't know how it works. You understand exactly what it is, and it makes sense. You understand warp speed, even though you couldn't build a warp capable engine. It kind of makes sense, right? And so he built this universe that kind of makes perfect sense. And again, within that universe, he was able to explore these really meaty subjects, and that I think was his most significant contribution. And because of that, you get the movies off of the original series cast, and then you get the Next Generation, which in my mind solidified Star Trek as a solid franchise. Because once you go from the original series there was an animated series in the mid 70s, but once you go from the original series to Next Generation in the 90s, then you got a solid platform from which you get everything that's there was a lot of people, myself included, maybe you, Thad, maybe our friend, you can't do a sequel to Star Trek. That's not going to work. You can't recreate Captain Kirk. But they did, and they were able to do that, and Next Generation was able to be successful because of this universe that Gene Roddenberry created in this sort of, I guess in technology, we would call it this platform, right? You have this platform that allows you to explore these really interesting issues and character issues.
Right, and the Next Generation, that ran for years, didn't it?
I think 7 or 8 seasons.
Yeah, that was a long-lived TV
and
show.
And that we could do a different episode, but actually I'm a bigger Next Gen fan than original series. So.
Oh, really? Okay. And they did bring back, there was how many movies? There was 1, 2, 3, or was it 5 movies with the original cast? 5 movies. And now that's where all those guys really cashed in. They were getting, $1 million paychecks to be in those movies. So, they got their due. Yeah, because when you look at, I looked up all the SAG rates for 1966, and the vast majority of people that would be on a TV show that was the whole idea of having, and SAG means Screen Actors Guild, folks. It's the union that represents people like Anuradha. But thank God she's not in it, or I'd be broke now. But but it was really, the weekly rate in 1966 was $350 for the average person, which would be like $2,800 in today's money. For a week. That's not terrible. I mean, you could live in LA, but they only made 26 episodes a year, right? So they really only worked 6 months a year, at least on that show. So, I mean, it's not like these people were getting rich. I mean, it was just sort of a slightly above average middle-class job.
It was steady work. Yeah.
It was steady work. Yeah. Right. But I mean, in going back to so William Shatner got divorced in the middle of making that show, and he could not afford, because he had 2 young daughters, he had to live in an RV with his dog. So, and he spends a whole lot of time telling those stories and stuff like that. So, I mean, he was not making a lot of money, and then just like trailer parks and stuff like that is where he literally lived, so, but then it all changed when the movie started, right? And they started getting big bucks.
Holy shit, my mind is blown. I just looked up Star Trek Next Generation, and I just realized that is also something that I used to see all the time. And I didn't connect, because I would see the old one with Spock, right? And hey, I said Spock first before Spark. I said Spock first. But anyways, so I remembered that, and then I remembered Star Trek Next Generation, but I never connected that it's the same thing, even though in my mind I'm like, okay, yeah, there's Spock and there's Patrick Stewart's, and now it's so crazy because now I'm like, oh my God, it's the same show, just a different. Thing.
Gene Roddenberry insisted, and for a long time, there were no crossovers. I mean, just a couple of times on Next Generation, they brought on Leonard Nimoy and they brought on James Doohan, but
DeForest Kelley was on once.
Yeah. But 98% of the time it was a conscious decision. They're not going to do crossovers. Mm-hmm. They're barely going to reference the original series. They're certainly not going to bring on William Shatner. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's a completely different cast. It's a completely different crew. It's got kind of a different feel to it. But here's the point I keep making: the themes and the underlying thematic structures draw heavily from the original series. Themes of racial bigotry. The Next Generation in the 90s gets into LGBTQ issues. It continues issues. One of the main recurring characters in the Next Generation is Q, who is basically God, right? But he's portrayed in a really sort of very disrespectful, almost comical way. He's more annoying than helpful. So this idea that superhuman, supernatural, godlike abilities are they're not something that we want to deal with. So all of those same themes, underlying thematic structures from the original series, make their way into the Next Generation, but it's just a whole different cast and a whole different crew.
But it's the same universe, right? It's there's a Federation, there are Klingons, there's Romulans. I mean, it's just 100 years later or something, right?
Yeah. It says century, almost a century after. Yeah.
One of the things that's most interesting, I think, draws people, maybe not explicitly, but one of the things that draws people to all of this franchise in every incarnation, starting with the original series with Spock the Vulcan, right? And actually, he's half human, half Vulcan. And then in Next Generation, there's the character of Data. In every one of these incarnations, there's a character, a main character, that their very presence raises questions of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a human being? What unique characteristics do we as human beings have? In Star Trek Voyager, much maligned thing, they have a character who is half Borg, half human. We're not, but it's 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan. So if you want to look something up, look up Jerry Ryan's costuming on Voyager. You'd be quite shocked. But the point is that this is one of the themes that Roddenberry created in the original series that carries through not the J.J. Abrams crap, but all the rest of the Star Trek stuff. Like, what does it mean to be human? What unique characteristics do we have as a human race that might be different or unique from other kinds of races? What are the things that are positive about that? What are the things that are negative about that? And he started that all with, I think it was like, I could find it here in just a second. It was,
very interesting.
Not the cage. It was, I can't believe I can't find these. Oh, The Enemy Within was the 5th aired episode on the original
I was
series.
going to mention that. Yeah, that was because the transporter accidentally divides him into two, William Shatner, Captain Kirk, into two people.
Right, the good and the bad. And so, and fast forward to the end of the episode, it's clear that neither one can survive without the other. So they have to figure out a way to get them back together, because the good Captain Kirk can't lead. He can't run the starship without his bad side. And then there's also a little bit later, Naked Time, right, where the crew kind of goes, they basically get exposed to this space material and they kind of all become drunk. And anyway, so there are all these plot devices that consistently explore this theme of what does it mean to be a human being? And I don't know if Wagon Train or Dragnet ever did that. I don't think so.
And you know what makes Spock so interesting is Anuradha, his alien race is which is called Vulcan, is entirely devoted to logic, passionless, stoic logic, right? And yet he himself his mother was human and his father was Vulcan. So even though he himself comes off as being always starts as being really logical and computer-like and things like that, he's constantly, and even that episode that Jim was talking about, Enemy Within, you know, he's talking to Captain Kirk, and the other guy is the medical doctor, and he's saying, look, I have this fight in me every single day. My human side wants to be emotional, and my Vulcan side is a computer, you know, so, and and, you know, and my, you know, I have to figure it out. I have to somehow get them to live together.
That's very interesting.
And the way that gets, you know, that's such a brilliant idea that Roddenberry came up with, and the way that they create, and it took a few episodes, right? Spock wasn't in like I said, he was the only cast member from the very first pilot that made it into the series. But the first few episodes, it took a while for Leonard Nimoy to kind of work that out and figure that out. But that's such a strong, so in the Next Generation, the mirror character is Data. He's not a Vulcan, but he's an android, a completely synthetic life form. But, you know, he's really sophisticated android played by Brett Spinner. And he spends the entire series trying to become more human. So he's always like exploring, like, oh, I want to paint because I want to be creative. So that's part of being human. I want, you know, and he tries to have relationships, and he just spends the entire series exploring what it means to be human so that he can continually develop more into something more human-like. And so from the original series, Leonard Nimoy playing Spock is one of the fan favorite characters by far. And on Next Generation, it's Data. And then even when you get into the subsequent series like Voyager, like I said, 7 of 9, partly because she's just incredibly attractive, but also because she's plays this role. So this idea that Roddenberry and Nimoy came up with in the mid 60s carries forward today.
Very cool.
Well, look,
I noticed Will Wheaton's in there too. Sorry, last comment. I promise. I'm just very fascinated right now. I love it. See, this is why I didn't want to read up ahead, because this is really cool. I noticed Will Wheaton's in Star Trek, and he's also in Big Bang Theory. So sorry, I'm done.
He's on Sheldon's enemies list.
Yeah, which is hilarious because Sheldon's obsessed with Star Trek. But Yeah. No, very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah, Will Wheaton's
Very
character in
interested.
The Next Generation is very divisive. Some people really like him and some people hate him.
I can imagine.
But yeah, he had guest appearances on The Big Bang Theory. I think
Yeah.
he married Sheldon and Amy, right? Didn't he officiate at their wedding or something?
I think that was William Shatner, wasn't it? Doesn't
I'm almost
William
sure it was
Shatner do
Will
it?
Wheaton.
Hold on, let me see this.
Maybe. You could be right.
Let's see. Yeah, William Shatner does.
Okay.
Oh, very cool.
But there's also this thing in Big Bang Theory. There's this point where...
oh, wait. Hold on. Mark Hamill does. Sorry. Mark Hamill
okay.
does. Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill from Star Wars. What do you know?
One of the scenes from The Big Bang Theory that always stuck with me is there's this point where Penny gives Sheldon a Christmas present, and he opens the Christmas present,
Yeah.
and it's a napkin. What is it?
Yeah.
And Penny's like, "Well, turn it over," and he turns it over, and it's like, "To Sheldon from Leonard Nimoy, live long and prosper." And he's like, he's overwhelmed, and then she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's dirty. He used it." He's like, "Oh my God, I have Leonard Nimoy's DNA."
And he starts
I can
freaking
make a
out.
Leonard
Yeah.
Nimoy.
Oh, that
I
was
could
funny.
clone Leonard
Yeah. That's a really
Rest in
good.
peace,
That's a
Leonard
really,
Nimoy.
really good show. You know, we can cover that at some point. But awesome. Good stuff, guys.
Yeah,
Well-
so that Big Bang Theory wasn't above using Kelly Kuko in really provocative ways, and she was all in on that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, she was pretty scantily clad in some episodes.
Yeah, one of the Halloween things. I mean, she's very pretty. She's a very attractive.
Is she the Priceline
actress.
girl?
Yeah. I like
Okay.
her.
Yeah, she is pretty.
There you go,
Yeah.
Thad. But anyways,
Okay.
sorry.
Finally, we found somebody in the entertainment industry. one woman. Oh,
No.
boy. Any last words anybody has about anything related to Star Trek, of course? Nothing? Okay. Well,
Your
no, this is
service
very
honors
exciting.
us.
This is very cool stuff. Thanks for sharing.
okay. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jim, for joining us yet again. And hopefully
for having me. It's fun.
we can do some additional episodes that cover other things, like maybe next generation of the movies or stuff like that. So, and thank you, Anuradha, as always, for being yourself. That's always awesome. So, so that's it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
We'll see you. Please follow or subscribe to Scandal Sheet on your favorite pod platform and share it with all your friends. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a shameless, over-the-top rave review on Apple Podcasts especially. That helps us build audience. And we would really appreciate it if you could support us on Patreon, where you can enjoy premium bonus content for less than the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Just go to patreon.com/scandalsheet. Also, we want to hear from you. You can reach us online at Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. Or just send us an email to scandalsheetpod@gmail.com. See you next time on Scandal Sheet.
Copyright 2025. Thad Halkley Media, LLC, all rights reserved.